Hi, I'm Prudence Granger, the carer in residence for the Carer Knowledge Exchange, and I was the carer for my dad who passed away from early onset Alzheimer's disease. This is Care to Share. On this podcast, I have open and honest conversations with carers. We talk about the roadblocks, challenges, and the joys of caring for a loved one. Today's episode may touch on some heavy themes. If you feel uneasy, take a break or skip ahead. This podcast is recorded on beautiful Gadigal land in Sydney. Today I'm in the studio with Kiara, a dedicated mother and advocate for her 3-year-old son Ryder, who has autism and global developmental delay. Kiara's caring journey began early in her life with her younger brother, who is also on the autism spectrum. Despite personal struggles, Kiara's resilience shines. Ryder is her inspiration and purpose, driving her determination. Thank you for being here with us today, Kiara. How are you?
I'm good.
You've been a carer most of your life. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yes, so I started caring at age 8. I'm the oldest of 5, and I was basically another parent for them. My youngest brother has autism, but I didn't start that caring process until a bit later in my teens. I didn't really resonate with the fact I was a carer until now, about a year ago. I realised that I was caring for him back then, but at the time I just thought I was an older sister doing what older sisters do.
You said this caring role kind of started at 8.
Yes.
But you leaned more into it in your teens. But at 8 years old, what did caring look like for you? Like, what was a day?
My mum and my stepdad went through a separation at 8. I had my younger sister at the time and then the second youngest sister. Mm-hmm. They were quite young, I think. One was 4 and one was just born. She was very, very new. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't caring in the traditional sense of the word. When I was caring for them, it was more of really doing everything a parent would do. It was cooking, cleaning. My mum wasn't in the state to do that. Mm-hmm. So I just stepped up. It was getting the girls ready for school, doing their hair, making sure they brush their teeth, putting their shoes on, making sure they had packed their homework for the day. Just very, very standard, traditional. What you would expect a parent to do is what I started doing. I think that did help ease me into the traditional sense of a carer with standard therapy appointments and stuff like that for my brother eventually, and then my son now. I would say I'm very grateful for that experience with my brother because that then made the experience of caring for my son a lot easier. So my brother was in and out of hospital. He had a lot of medical issues as well as his disability. So he spent 6 months in a hospital bed. He was at Westmead Children's for 6 months. So I had to step up then too. I had to step up and look after 4 kids. Mm-hmm. At the time, I was working 2 jobs and going to school full-time. I was a grade A student my whole life, was gunning for a law position at uni, needed the ATAR to get there, had the grades, was first in my class, all the good things. The caring role was hard, especially when my brother was in hospital, because I was coming home from school, going to Westmead Children's on a train, coming back, going to work at Kmart, and then coming home again and doing it all again while in year 11 and 12. So it was hard. It was a lot easier once he was out of hospital with his therapy appointments. I didn't realise the effect it had on me until I ended up eventually being kicked out. Once I had that separation, I realised just how bad it was. Ended up leaving school 2 weeks before my ATAR. The burnout I had, I've never felt anything like it in my life. The burnout, I couldn't do it anymore. And that I honestly think it was a culmination of everything. That extended caring of putting everyone before myself for the longest time, it took its toll. It caught up to me and I ended up not graduating. I don't have a year 12 certificate. I didn't get to do uni. I am now, but I didn't get to then. So my life took a drastic change in a day. It definitely affected my social life. Everyone knew my brother. Everyone loved him, but everyone knew that, okay, Kiara may not be able to do this because she has to stay home and watch the 4 kids, or she has to do this or do this. So When I was younger, the term young carer wasn't a thing. The term carer wasn't a thing. I always, if I asked 17-year-old me what a carer was, it would be a support worker in the traditional sense that I know now.
It's still a term that's not very well defined.
Yes.
I think a lot of the times when I have conversations with people outside of this world and I say carer and they instantly think support worker, nurse. And
Yes.
I'm like, no.
Yeah, and carers are hidden. We are hidden behind our roles. We're hidden behind, everything we do is hidden.
So you've talked a bit about not realising what the impact would be, and in hindsight now, what was the overall impact of this caring?
So in hindsight, complete burnout, mental burnout. I started having seizures at 18. They were not epileptic seizures, they were caused by stress. At the time, I think they were called pseudo-seizures, but they're very, very different now. There's a different term. I was exhausted. I'm so grateful for my partner's family. I slept for about 20 hours a day at one point. I couldn't wake up. I was completely done. I had just come out of fight or flight mode for the first time in my life. My nervous system had finally taken a break, but it had completely shut down and I didn't know what to do. It took a massive mental toll on me. My mental health absolutely plummeted. So being a carer from 8 all the way up till now, I felt lost. I didn't know what to do. And it continued like that for the longest time. I had to seek mental health help. So yeah, it took a long time, a lot of medication, a lot of therapy, a lot of all of that. And yeah, we're finally starting to see the good parts now, but it also impacted my path in life. I was going to be the lawyer at uni. I was going to live in the studio apartment in the city. I was going to do all these great and wonderful things, and I didn't even graduate.
So you're now the mother to Ryder.
Yes.
And growing up a carer for your younger siblings likely prepared you a little bit for motherhood.
Yes, absolutely.
What has felt different between caring for your siblings and being the mother to Ryder?
I am now in complete control of the decisions, and the burden of that is scary. The burden's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the weight of it and the importance of those decisions. The decisions I make may impact my child's life in the next 30, 50, 60 years. Whereas I didn't have that with my siblings. I wasn't the one making the decisions. I'd also say I get more joy out of my caring role now, especially because I'm there when we're working on the changes, we're working on the therapies, we're working through, and then I see the end, and it's the most beautiful thing in the world to see the start and the end and to be a part of it. And it really is. He's growing up so quickly and he's developing so quickly and he's coming along so quickly, and watching that is my favourite thing.
When did you learn of Ryder's autism?
So initially we just thought he had a speech delay. That was around 9 months old. And then we went to his paediatrician at 18 months. She diagnosed him with global developmental delay, and then she wasn't sure. So we ended up going to Westmead Children's Hospital, a clinic there, and they diagnosed him, I think it was around 2, with autism, and they also upheld global developmental delay.
So you said you thought at first it was just a speech delay, you said?
Yep.
So you didn't see any similarities, I guess, between Ryder and your brother?
Yeah, I would say it's a different experience. I think also just being a parent clouds your judgment a little bit. I was so emotionally attached, obviously. That emotion clouds things sometimes. So my brother was verbal. He is verbal. He didn't have the same behavioural things that we saw with Ryder. Just very, very different. From memory, they're different levels as well. So Ryder is level 3. I'm pretty sure my brother was a different level. So we initially thought it was a speech delay. Ryder wouldn't imitate you. He had some eye contact, but it wasn't a lot. He would only babble sometimes. So I noticed that at around 9 months. Hayden, my partner, said, let's wait a second. Let's give him some time. He's only 9 months old. I'm very grateful he did. But around 18 months, that's when we saw a very quick regression in Ryder's skills. And my baby that ate everything, I cooked him all his I home cooked all his meals. He would eat eggplant and, anything I put in front of him, he would eat that very quickly. The next day, he just stopped. He wouldn't eat a thing, wouldn't drink a thing, wouldn't eat a thing. He stopped babbling. His first word was car. That's the first word he ever said. That stopped. We didn't hear car again until about 6 months ago. Ryder would look to hurt himself. He experiences self-injurious behaviours. And that was the hardest part of it. That's when we started thinking, okay, we really, really need to start looking into this a little bit more because he's starting to hurt himself.
So you mentioned level 3 autism. Can you talk me through that a little bit? I'm not that aware of it.
Yeah, so there's 3 levels. There's 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the most severe. Level 3 autism, according to his medical reports, it says requiring very substantial support. I think the difference in levels is the support needs of the child. I don't like to place too much importance on levels because I think every child should just get the care that they deserve and need. But that is technically what it means, yes. So it is the most severe. It is the one requiring the most support.
Considering he needs quite a large amount of support,
yes.
What is an average day of caring like for you?
It's a lot of therapy appointments. We see 4 therapists a week. Add in medical appointments to that as well. It can be very, very hectic sometimes. So between therapies, it's a lot of outdoors. My son's a little bug. He's my bug. I call him my bug. So he's in the dirt. He's my little wild child. He loves anything outside. So a lot of that. But with that comes overstimulation, and that then leads to a lot of emotional regulation on the days he doesn't have therapies. So I'm educated by his therapists on how to implement certain things at home. So on the days we don't have therapy, I'm working on them with him. We also implement things like speech and stuff like that pretty much 24/7. We are trained in certain ways. So we use PEX cards at home. It's visuals for him to make his choices. And we use that for his TV shows. You name it, we do it. It's a lot of repeating what he says, a lot of emphasizing what he says, a lot of things like that. So our typical day is just a lot of therapy. My poor bug. A lot of therapy and a lot of emotional regulation. We also quite frequently deal with meltdowns. Now, people think meltdowns and tantrums are the same thing. They are very, very different. My son is 3. He can chuck a tantrum so well, but they are very, very different to meltdowns. Ryder's meltdowns can last upwards of 6 hours. That is caused due to complete sensory overload. In my son's case, it's due to sensory sensitivities and overwhelm and overstimulation. So a lot of our days can sometimes go haywire and just pear-shaped because he has a meltdown and we need to work on that. And as I said, they can last upwards of 6 hours. So during a meltdown, my son seeks to hurt himself. He will look for the sharpest corner in the room so he can bang his head against it. It's brutal. It's brutal. And the one that it hurts most is him. I've had so many busted lips, black eyes, and, that's not because of Ryder. That's because there's no one else there to take that. There's no support that's coming. No one's coming to save me. This is what care is. This is what care is experience. It's like he can't hear you. He can't see you. It's complete overwhelm of every sensory system in his body. He is in complete fight or flight. He will put up a good fight. He does it well. It's very, very hard to bring my son out of meltdown.
So how did you learn what to do with Ryder during a meltdown or in order to support him in his emotional regulation?
A lot of it was trial by error, really just instinctually listening to what his body is showing me. Ryder cannot tell me with his words, he shows me with his body. He shows both of us, Hayden and I, with his body, and we have to closely pay attention to that. We do have positive behaviour specialists that have come in, worked with Ryder, given us tips and pointers, but in all honesty, none of them have worked.
You've spoken about Ryder's processes and his meltdowns and essentially go alongside him with those meltdowns and work towards his emotional regulation. But how do you process it? How do you find your emotional regulation or your reprieve?
A lot of the times it is a lot of aftercare. And in that sense for both Ryder and I, that looks like cuddles on the lounge after a 6-hour meltdown. That looks like massaging his feet while he's finally calming down. That's where I find my comfort. I feel like I can finally take a breath when he is able to just relax and I see my little boy back. He's always my little boy, but it's hard. It's hard to help him in that state. So once we're finally at a regulation level that is normal for Ryder, that's where I can take a breath. I can breathe. A lot of the times it's me going to my partner after he gets home and literally collapsing in that man's arms, just sobbing. And he's just like, hard day. I'm like, hard day. And that's all that we need to say. And we get it.
Do you think that the healthcare system has a bit of a blind spot when it comes to disability and carers?
Yeah.
In that, that it's about Ryder and what Ryder needs. Have you ever had this feeling of like, hey, but what about me? Like, what about what I need?
So I like to advocate that to help the person who's being cared for the most, we need to protect the carers. We need to advocate for the carers. We need to listen to them. We need to validate them. We need to support them. That is how you help a care recipient the most. That's how you get them to be the best of their ability. As a primary carer, I have realised that I have been offered more support through places like Carers Gateway, government organisations, than my partner ever will. As a secondary carer, I say that in quotation marks, secondary carer, he does not qualify for any support. He doesn't get anything, and he's facing it just as much as I am. I think there is a massive gap in the system. We're fighting so hard for the person who is receiving the support, their needs. We are going at 100 miles an hour, but we are left out.
So how do you find navigating the NDIS?
That honestly has been the hardest learning curve. Caring for my son is the easy part. Dealing with the systems and the organisations and the red tape that surrounds a caring role, that is the hardest part. It is so hard. It was one of the hardest things I've done. We have just recently gone through a change of circumstances review for my son. That system almost put me in complete burnout. It wasn't Ryder's care needs. It wasn't the support he needed. It wasn't his therapist. It was navigating a process that I did not understand, and the demands of that process were so intense. I prepared for that review for 18 months. And it was the most daunting thing I've ever experienced, especially because you are advocating, in my experience, for your child. You are advocating for their needs. You are begging for the most minimum amount of funding. We weren't asking for much at all. Yeah, we worked on it for 18 months. We got every report. I'd like to give a huge plug to Carers Gateway right now. There was one very special lady named Meg. She is a carers specialist at Carers Gateway. She held my hand, educated me, gave me guidance. She was the beacon of light in the rough, stormy, really scary waters. Her main role was to educate me on the NDIS process. The fact I know it's called an S28 review is completely because of Meg. I was going in there blind, had no idea. That system, that organisation literally saved my mental health, saved everything. She is one of the angels that when I think about that process, she is my light. Yeah.
So you mentioned there's a lot of red tape within the system or within the NDIS. Could you please give me some examples of that red tape that you kind of had to get through?
So to start the process of a change of circumstance review, I had to submit all Ryder's documentation. So you had to get every report from every therapist. It had to be extremely detailed. It had to be worded in a way that advocates the best for my son, in my experience. So that took 18 months. Just getting the reports, getting everything like that took 18 months. So you have to request a review. You have to request a meeting. So what that looks like is sending all of these reports for NDIS to make a decision on whether you even get a meeting. So they can be like, no, you're stuck with the plan you have now for another 12 months until the ending. So in my experience, they came back and said, yes, we're going to do a change of circumstance review. We're going to do a plan review. Then everything gets sent to another department in the NDIS. Did that in December. Did not hear back from them until March. And I was quick. That was quick. I'm on a lot of forums with other carers. I was lucky in the fact that it took that long or quick. So, they're doing a plan review. They're going to give you a meeting to give your plan review. You do the plan review meeting, which between that was 6 months for me. Then you have to wait for a delegate to finalise the plan. That took about another month. We then had the plan review meeting, which was the big meeting, the thing we had been working for. From that point forth, I was pretty confident that the plan that we agreed on then was the plan we're going to get. But it can change. It can change. Nothing is final until it's final, right? So we then waited a week for the plan to be implemented, finalised, approved by all the delegates, all the things, and uploaded. So the whole process took me, if you want to go back to the reports took 18 months in themselves. The actual contact with NDIS probably took about 6 to 8 months altogether. And in that time, my son had run out of funding. That's with us budgeting to the cent. The reason we ran out of funding that quickly was because I had to use the funding to get the reports needed for the NDIS review. One of his reports cost $5,000 out of his budget. $5,000 out of his budget, gone. That's about almost a year of therapy.
This week, the federal budget was released and There's been a $14 billion cut to the NDIS. What impact do you think that will have?
I don't know. None of it would be positive. I know that. We are begging for help and we're not doing it because we want to be doing it. That's what I always say to everyone. We want to be there helping our person. When I say our person, my son, Ryder, caring for him is my favourite thing in the world. I wouldn't change it ever. But the organisations and the systems and the process around it are begging for help. We need help. Carers need help. We need support. When you see things like a budget cut of $14 billion, it's just, where do we go? Who do you ask? The organisations that we can ask won't be here for much longer if this keeps happening. So personally, I am financially planning already. I'm 24 years old. I am planning for my 3-year-old to not have access to the NDIS or a pension or stuff like that when I'm already gone. I am planning for him to be 80 and not receive any of that. I am already putting money aside. We are looking at insurance. We're looking at everything we can do. 24 years old because I just cannot trust this system, that this system will support my child. Carers are so hidden. Our caring role is hidden. We are actually taking the burden off these organisations and these governments by doing what we do. You take away a carer, you start putting them in burnout, and carer burnout is a real thing. You take away the carer, you start putting more pressure on these organisations and these government departments, and the cycle, it's not going to work. They don't have the funding, they don't have the resources, they don't have any of it.
As a carer, you want to care. You
Exactly.
do. It's from your heart.
Exactly.
It's your loved one. But there's also limits. There's also your life. There's also sustainability.
Yes.
And we're not really asking for much.
Exactly. I always talk about a carer being functionally sustained. What that looks like to me isn't very intense at all. It's just access to help, access to support, having people there that you can go to and ask, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing with this. Where do I turn? Where do I look? It's not a lot. We're not asking for a lot, but we do it out of love. And I think that's what gets forgotten in all of this. We do this because we want to do this, and it does sound like we're complaining. There will be people that will say, why are you complaining about it, then you have the NDIS. And I'd like to make the point clear that I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the NDIS because I don't know what I'd do without it.
How do you feel? Like, is it an empowering system?
I think there's two different sides to it. With my son's therapist, we have built a level of trust there. They completely trust me and my input. They will come to me first. What do you think? Why do you think this is happening? What do you think is happening? And they go off my opinion. They put so much trust in me. And they always say that, parents' instinct, you just know. That would also resonate to other carers of loved ones or friends. But then when I go to the NDIS side, there is no trust. They don't trust me. In my personal experience, I felt like I had to prove how disabled my son was. And I hate saying that.
And that's traumatic.
I hate saying that because my son's disability is the least interesting thing about him. But throughout that process, that's all I had to talk about. And I felt like I was, I felt like all I talked about was the negatives. I wasn't able to go there and say, my son is so great at this. He's so good at this. It was just about what he can't do. And that isn't empowering. And then once you finally go through this rigmarole, once you finally cut through all the red tape, you're at the end, they can turn around and cut your funding. The thought of having to talk to NDIS makes me sick. Mm. It's an exhausting process. And I remember going to Hayden one day and saying, I just want to be able to care for him. Mm. And I feel like that process almost stopped me being able to do that. I can't care for him in the best way possible if I can't get him the help that he needs or access the therapies or the supports that he needs. So, you end up paying privately and you do all that good stuff. So, yeah.
So you just said you don't really get an opportunity to talk about all the good things about Ryder.
Yes.
So do you want to take an opportunity now to, to tell everyone all the wonderful things about your son?
Ryder is my reason and my purpose always. He saved my life in every way, shape and form. He's so independent and he's so strong and he's so intelligent. But he's not intelligent in the traditional sense that everyone thinks. You can put something in front of my son and he will learn to build it in 10 seconds. He learnt to ride a bike at 2. He zips around, he's so fast. So Ryder's brain works so differently, and I think that's a beautiful thing about him. He sees the world in a way that I will never see it, and I envy it a little bit. He is so happy. I'm so grateful for him, and he really is the best. He's my favourite person.
I love that.
Yeah.
I used to say that about my dad.
Yeah. You get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're there beyond their disability.
Yeah.
And sometimes the system makes you only see the disability.
Absolutely.
And that's so hard because you want the world to see everything but.
Yes.
And
as I say, my son's disability is the least interesting thing about him.
You are an extremely resilient young woman. And you have so many passions in advocacy. I know you're at uni seeking your own education currently as well. Where do you think this, this resilience, this strength within you comes from?
My whole life, I've never had any other choice. You just have to roll with the punches. You just have to keep moving. I've been prepped to be resilient from the day I was born.
I really appreciate everything you've shared with us today. I am extremely moved by your story, and I think you have such a capacity to make a change.
Thank you.
And I feel like Ryder is the most lucky little boy in the world to have you. And I really, really can't wait to see your advocacy in action.
I just feel like someone needs to listen. So I will scream it from the rooftops if I have to. Someone will have to listen one day. So
I'll stand alongside you screaming.
Yes, we can do it together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Care to Share. a product of Impact Studios at UTS and the Kiara Knowledge Exchange. I would like to dedicate this show to my father, Timothy Granger, who passed away during the recording of Season 1. Caring for him was an experience that has changed my life forever. He was my biggest champion, my best friend, and now my greatest inspiration. The Kiara Knowledge Exchange brings together carers and former carers, researchers, policymakers and practitioners to share knowledge in a bid to improve the lives of carers by connecting research to practice. It's a partnership with Carers New South Wales and the Institute for Public Policy and Governance at UTS in Sydney. If anything in today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to learn more, visit us at carerknowledgeexchange.com.au. Support resources and relevant links will be provided in the show notes.